All right, we're at about 2 after, so I feel like we can go ahead and hop into our slides. I know for many of you, this is not your first meeting. If it is your first meeting, when we do our introductions, please let us know. We'd love to welcome you in, learn more about you, where you're from, and what brought you to the meeting. So thank you for joining our June membership monthly meeting for the Rural Community Health Worker Network. The Rural Community Health Worker Network has a mission to make sure that our frontline workforce is supported and seen and raise awareness. Our values are making sure that we are visible and making visible the commitment of the work of our community health workers, and also elevating our resident voice with inclusion of those that we serve. We do that with 3 strategies: awareness, network, and our outreach. And you guys are all part of the network. And I see some familiar faces, those who have participated with the RCHW, and then also some that are participating in our outreach projects. Our vision at the Rural Community Health Worker Network is to ensure that the national audience of community health workers can build a peer-to-peer network, effectively having allies and advocates, and making sure, again, that our contributions are very visible. In our June webinar, we are focused on dynamic communication. Special focus as we think about communication, and the construct for today is around communication with supervision and with our care teams, whether that be in the community-based setting or in a healthcare-based setting. Our I am a CHW or I am statement for today is I am an effective communicator. So as we go through our slides and our discussion, try to center yourself in and what it is that you're doing in your day-to-day work to be an effective communicator. My name is Shannon Lieski. I am your guys' board president. I'm also the CEO at Everyday Life Consulting, and I will be your guest speaker today. Andrea, who originally was going to do the presentation, has been pulled to do class. As you guys have, most of you have participated in the class. She's teaching in Alabama today. For those of you who are listening to the recording, we would like to share that your homework for today will be to share one struggle and/or barrier that you've experienced in communicating effectively. What's been like getting in the way of that effective communication? For technical assistance, please email or call Rebecca Alba. Her email is rebecca@rchwn.org, and her phone number is 517-282-0724. So let's dive on in. Welcomes and icebreakers. Since we meet monthly and as we are building our community here, it's always great to hear from each and every one of you. So in your icebreaker, please feel free to give your name, maybe your location or your organization, or the type of work that you do, just a reference, as our CHW workforce is very diverse. For your icebreaker, I'd like you guys to share your favorite childhood game. And I'm going to tag Alizar first. Oh, You're on mute. My apologies. It mutes everybody when we first start.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. I'm Alizar Kroman. I'm in Marquette, Michigan, on the shores of Lake Superior in the Upper Peninsula. I am a community health worker with UP Health System, Marquette, Bell, and Portage. We operate 3 hospitals in 2 counties here in the Upper Peninsula. My favorite childhood game as a kid was probably kickball. On the street that I grew up in Seattle, the kickball court, so to speak, was right in front of my house. So it was convenient for me to get to, and the neighborhood kids would congregate there and play for hours on end, and it was a really, really good time, except when Rose, my next door neighbor, was out. She was a little old lady who planted rose gardens all around her house, so we had to really be careful to not whack her in the head with the kickball, which did happen a time or two. So that added another element of danger to the game. But that was my favorite kid game growing up in the neighborhood. Thanks.
And in spirit of games, I'll let you tag who's next.
Oh, let's see. I got to open up the gallery again. Well, I can't see anybody. I know Megan is here, right? Or Melinda, I'm sorry. How about Melinda?
Thank you, Alizar. Hi, everybody. I'm Melinda Harp. I am the Core Special Projects Manager and with RCHWN Outreach with our 2-on-1 contract. Let's see, I'm located in Midland. My special favorite game, I guess, would be Candyland growing up. I was just something that like the neighborhood kids and I would play. It wasn't, you know, it was other than the outside stuff, we would do that. Or like we would play just like Go Fish a lot with the card games. Just something that, you know, those type of things we bring back to our children now that are growing up. So it's always something fun, and you know, you can always say, hey, I beat you, and they're like, how did you know how to do that? And because we played it for endless hours, you know, growing up, when life was a lot easier, I should say. And let's see, I am going to tag Katie Saylor.
Hi, I'm Katie Saylor. I am in Midland, Michigan as well. I work at Family Practice Center at my Michigan Health System. And my favorite childhood game was Clue. I used to love to play that. Me and my sister would play all the time. And I still got my skills because I use them on my 13-year-old. I am going to tag Corrine.
Hi, I'm Corrine Wozniak. I'll turn my camera on so you can see me. I am a CHW at my Michigan Family Medicine in Alpena. And my favorite childhood game was probably Ghosts in the Graveyard when all of my cousins were over and they were staying close by. We would all go out at night and hide all over the yard and try to find people. And it was a lot of fun because I have tons of cousins, so there would be like 20, 30 kids out playing. And I will tag, how about Sissy Mitchell?
Hi there. I can't get my camera on though. Let's see. I'm up here in Benzonia, Michigan. I work for the Grand Traverse Band, and my favorite game was hide and seek. I guess there was only 2 of us around, so we lived out in the country in the middle of nowhere. So it was just me and my brother. But that's it. I don't, Shelley Long. Did she go? That's the next one I see.
Hi, I'm Shelley Long. I am with my Michigan Health and Gladwin here. My favorite childhood game was Red Rover. I'm not really sure who's left here.
If I'm correct, I think we have Whitney and Jenny.
Whitney.
I'm Whitney. I live in Everett, Michigan. I work for RCHWN with the 2-on-1 contract. And my childhood favorite game, I'm torn between two, between Monopoly or Cribbage. So those are the two I played the most growing up. And I'll hop it over to Jenny.
Hi, my name is Jenny, and I'm with RCHWN as well. And I had to agree with kickball. I think kickball was one of those games that was like always fun growing up and playing. And Donkey Kong, of course. I loved playing on the Nintendo when I was young too. So those are my two.
Thank you. Looks like Sarah's joining us. You want to go, Sarah?
Yes. My name is Sarah Cheek. I'm a CHW at the Disability Network doing NFT work. And my favorite game growing up was Spoons. We used to get bring a big old folding table and there'd be like 10 of us in the neighborhood that would all play Spoons in the little yard. It was awesome. And now my kids love that one too.
That's a fun one. Oh, Rebecca, thank you for joining us. We were just doing quick introductions and sharing our favorite childhood game.
Are you wanting me to introduce myself?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not turning on my camera because I look horrible. Because I just got home from picking my daughter up from softball camp and running around Costco like a crazy person. So my name is Rebecca Alba. I am Creator of Opportunities with RCHWN. I am the person that bothers you about renewing your membership, signing up for membership, going to a convention, chipping in, joining a webinar, or just being social. Let's see what else about me. I have to tell my favorite game.
Yeah.
What is my favorite game? I'm going to say my favorite game is probably cornhole.
Okay. Well, thank you guys all for sharing. I am Shannon Lieski, as I mentioned. I am our board president currently for RCHWN and a CHW and consultant with Everyday Life. I really liked flashlight tag as a kid. I can say it as an adult. That sounds so terrible. I don't play any games ever. And none of my kids played games growing up. And so I feel like they've missed this part of childhood that was something so near and dear, but they're also in a technology world now. So it's just very different when we say well, what game? And so I need to learn and catch on to all of those that they're involved in. But thank you again for participating. And I thought it feeds a lot into just our communication styles and who we are and what we do and common interests. Sometimes even working with our clients, we're finding common ground. And those are things that ease communication, or to me, our strategy to effective communication is being able to have those connections with the people that we're communicating with. So today in our micro learning, we are going to touch on 4 key areas. We're going to discuss the 4 different styles of communication. Again, this is when we say 4, we'll get into what those 4 are for today's purposes, but know that there are a lot of different topics of communication. Strategies to effective communication, why do we communicate the way that we do, and then also knowing our audience. Communication style. Today we're going to focus in on 4 areas. We're going to talk about passive communicator, aggressive communicator, assertive, and passive aggressive. So these are 4 main communication styles that really influence whether or not we're able to be an effective communicator. When you tie that into all the other things that you do as a community health worker with your motivational interviewing and documentation and engagement, These are also things that are contributing to that conversation. I was thinking I stayed pretty broad with my slides because I wanted to see who we had in the room. So when we talk about the 4 styles, I'm going to do a little more lecture than slides at this point, but I'll make sure we fill some of those in for our active learners. So passive communication, this is a style in which individuals are essentially avoiding maybe expressing their opinions, protecting their feelings, and as a result, kind of a passive individual might not respond very directly. Instead, they might allow some of these things to mound up within themselves. But once they've reached a certain tolerance or threshold, this is where you can see some outbursts and or triggering incidents might cause those outbursts. So we can all picture in our mind, again, this type of communication style. One thing to keep in mind is that you could be all or one of the communication styles, and communication styles are also very influenced by your ability to have emotional intelligence and given the scenario, right? We all respond differently in different situations. The passive communicator will often fail to assert themselves in situations where they should be asserting themselves. Often could allow others to deliberately or inadvertently, right, infringe on their rights, could fail to express their feelings, their opinions, or their needs, could tend to speak softly or apologetically, or exhibit, maybe poor eye contact. What are some things that you think could be impactful, or what things would impact this pattern?
That particular pattern, or do you mean what communication style a person sort of defaults to?
What I'm looking for here, it says the impact of the pattern of a passive communicator is that these individuals blank. So in this case, could often feel anxious because life seems out of control. What are some things that are happening due to this communication style?
No, there could be some fear about, what might come back to them if they voice their opinion or, stand up for themselves, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. I know we usually have a mixed group who accesses the chat and who doesn't, but I did put in a Jamboard link. If you are interested in sharing, or you could use the chat. There's just a variety of ways to share your feedback.
I know I was kind of thinking along the same lines as Alazar that, there could possibly be maybe some abuse either in her past or currently. It could also be, human trafficking. There's just lots of different reasons, that someone could have a could be a passive communicator.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes this person might be resentful or unaware and feeling like their needs are not being met. What are some phrases that a passive communicator would say that would lead you to believe that that would be an example of passive communication?
First thing that came to mind was, I guess, like prefacing things. you know, opinions maybe, or suggestions with, you know, like, well, I guess, you know, we could do this, or I guess, I think that, just not being real sort of confident in what they're contributing to the dialogue.
Yeah.
Or if you want to, or if you'd like to, you know, kind of deferring to other people in the conversation or in the group.
I agree to what Elazar is saying as well. You seem to hear that a lot more often.
Thanks, Melinda.
Yeah. I hear sometimes people don't consider my feelings, or I feel like I'm getting stepped on by everybody. How about the opposite of that? You know, as we talk about an aggressive communicator or aggressive communication style, this tends to be somebody who is very freely expressing of their opinions and is an advocate in a way that could sometimes violate others, right? It could step over others. Some of these times can lead to being verbally or physically abusive, although an aggressive communicator, that's not always the case. But they do often try to dominate the conversation, sometimes can use humiliation as a control tactic, or criticize, blame, you know, attack others. They could have a lower level of like tolerance or get frustrated easier, could speak loud, not listen. What are some things from this type of communication that you would hear as far as like what they're saying that you would then know that this is an aggressive communication?
Here's the deal, people. Or let me explain something to you. Those kinds of things, like coming from a position of, you know, my opinion is correct and applies to everyone, and you know, I'm not like open to other interpretations or ideas or whatever, like it's my way or the highway kind of a, you know, mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that, and I've heard, who are you to judge me? Look at the position you're in. You can't judge me for what I'm saying. Or like, you know, they try to throw it back at you that it's your fault. They put the blame on you. They won't take the blame for anything. And then, you know, I've heard people say, oh, apparently you're always right. And they're like, yeah, actually I am. What's your problem? You know, so I mean, I've heard that a lot. And, you know, I actually heard that yesterday. So it actually was something in a conversation. I said something to someone, and, you know, they actually said, well, they don't know what they're talking about. I do, because, you know, I'm never wrong. You know, I was just like, okay. Kind of have to leave it at that.
I laugh because I think of some of the things we tell our children, and that what I know has come up in our house, where it's like, well, I am right. I'm always right.
I had a doctor recently that I was in a discussion with, as a patient. I was the patient, rattle off his credentials and where he went to school and his degrees and whatever, and then said something like, but I appreciate you, you know, spending a few minutes researching this on Google, you know. And
how did that make you feel?
What I said to him was, I don't think we're going to be a good fit, like as a patient doctor. So I won't be scheduling another appointment with you, Dr. Cates. Thanks for your time. It made me feel like he was not very open to, you know, my input about my health.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that one, Elazar, because that can happen, right? You know, if we have a very, as a matter of fact, this is the way it is. And sometimes we don't even catch ourselves doing it in the work that we're doing with our, you know, client base, or even with our superiors or our colleagues. You know, we have to think about how we're coming across and how that's going to either effectively engage the other party or shut them down. I had a very similar experience, Alizar, and I was so blown away, right? Because we live in this world of optimizing health and patient-centered care, and we always talk a good talk, right? How many of us are in design committees, right, where we're planning the perfect process, and then when you're on the other end, you're like, wow, this process really is terrible and broken, and like I almost had a reaction of like, who do you think you are? You know, I probably did not handle it as well as you would have, Alizar. I was not very kind to the man, but he also had a student with him. And so I thought, to be a preceptor in teaching the next generation, your arrogance is not acceptable. But we're in a service industry, right? And so there are times where we're going to have to be assertive and just direct, concrete, you know, and clear. But are we being aggressive about it? Or are we being, you know, wishy-washy, being somewhat passive? And when do we need to ebb and flow those? Have you ever been in a conversation, right, where somebody starts to elevate their voice in a way to, you know, kind of dominate the conversation or be heard? For the next one, so we talked through passive, aggressive. Now we go to like our passive aggressive, so that somewhat intermediary is a style in which individuals appear to be kind of passive on the surface, but really on the inside, they're acting out in anger in a very subtle or indirect way, often behind the scenes. People develop a pattern of passive aggressive communication, often usually feel kind of powerless or stuck, or maybe resentful. They have the inability oftentimes to deal directly with people, and they're resentful of that, but then at the same time, they are able to express that anger in kind of undermining or in other areas. These communicators will often maybe mutter to themselves rather than confronting the person, and or use facial expressions. So those nonverbal communication cues, they could have difficulty acknowledging their own anger, their own feelings. They might use sarcasm or deny a problem. They could appear to be cooperative, but at the same time purposely try to disrupt the conversation or disrupt whatever the objective is, and or be very subtle and just kind of outright sabotage. The biggest thing here with this one, the impact of these individuals, is often they become alienated from those around them. They could really feel in a position of powerlessness and or discharge kind of that resentment in a very immature way. For these communicators, what are some common phrases, some common things that you would hear from them, or maybe even common actions?
I think like it has to do with like their tone and body language. You know, whether it's like you're trying to talk to them, they might be like rolling their eyes and saying, "Yeah, okay, we can do that," or you know, huffing and puffing, or just saying phrases like, "Well, whatever you want to do," in the tone and the way they say it. Like they're being passive, but their tone is showing their aggressive communicating side.
I like that. You're hearing their tone. Mm-hmm. How about others?
I think thanking people for their contributions or their ideas with that sarcastic tone is one thing that some passive aggressive people do.
Mm-hmm. I was in a meeting once and I finally caught on to it by the end, where someone that wasn't able to necessarily outwardly express themselves, you would hear him respond with, "That's fantastic." And you could see it on his face where I was kind of confused, thinking, I don't feel like he thinks that's fantastic, but like he's saying it very chipper, and the facilitator was absolutely not catching on to the nonverbal cues until, you know, like I said, like the fourth or fifth time, I'm thinking, I don't think he's agreeing to this volunteerism. It was kind of those like voluntoldisms, and she's like, oh yes, that's fantastic. I was like, oh, he's not liking this. I know for myself, I never felt like I had any of these tendencies by all means. And I was caught once, and someone called me out on it. Not my mother-in-law, but my sister-in-law's mother, however that ends up being. I said, it's interesting. And she called me right out and she said, I don't think you like it. And I was like, well, it's about cake. She had this cake that she ordered and it was terrible cake. And so she said, hey, how's the cake? I said, it's just very interesting. And she said, well, then you don't like it. I was like, when you put it that way, no, I don't like it. But I didn't want to say anything to hurt your feelings, you know. And I've realized, and I've caught myself say it more than once in different scenarios where it is kind of an avoidance communication that I'm doing, but to some, they took it as very passive aggressive. And to me, I was just trying to be a little more like socially polite. But we have to, again, think of those things or maybe what they mean to others. All right, our fourth and final, so assertive communication. This is a style in which individuals can clearly state their opinions and feelings very firmly, have the ability to advocate for their rights, for their needs without violating others. These individuals tend to value themselves, their time, their emotions, and try to be respectful of others. I can say in most respects, there's a fine line between the assertive and the aggressive. And you might find that, you know, people are being aggressive or you're perceiving them to be aggressive or vice versa, they're perceiving you to be aggressive. And there's trying to be assertiveness that has escalated. These assertive communicators will be able to use I statements. So it's one thing that you look for. Can listen without interrupting, display self-control and eye contact, and not manipulate the conversation. They'll be able to then express themselves clearly, but also be able to be respectful of other people's communication. So with an assertive communicator, what are some things that you're going to hear, or you believe that you would hear, or actions that you would see?
Help me understand what it is that you're trying to convey to me, because I don't, at this point, get it, or I don't feel like I get it. So you're kind of directing. Oh, sorry.
Yes, I like that one. I'm just keeping track of it in our Jamboard.
So you're kind of trying to direct somebody else, you know, you're sort of telling someone else what to do, but then you're like qualifying it with the, you know, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from, which I think many times will sort of soften the blow as far as trying to tell someone else what to do, because they understand why you're doing it, maybe.
One that I know I've said and I've heard, you know, I realize I have choices and I will consider my options. Another example that's, oh, go ahead.
Go say, maybe let's take a step back, you know, and whatever, take a break, take a pause, you know, start over, you know, if things feel like they're kind of getting away from you, people are getting heated or emotional, or you're sort of, you know, off, you know, and down some rabbit hole and you feel like it's time to redirect.
I'll hear sometimes in meetings, right? We're all here equally to share opinions and to respect one another. as we move on and talk more deeper into like our strategies, we shared a little bit about like what would you say, what would somebody else say. The reason why this is important is because it's how we use the communication strategies is what matters at the end of the day. We need to be able to identify them, maybe ask or clarify if we need to, if there's emotions, right? What else is going on in this construct? What else is going on in the room? So I wanted to, there we go. I wanted to skip ahead. These are a little different order as our conversation's guiding us. But the biggest thing that I've learned as a strategy and tip is to get to know your audience and know what else is going on. Again, back to our work with our clients and with our superiors. I mean, really at the end of the day, it's the same audience. If you're not making progress with the conversation, what else is going on? Is it that I'm not the most effective communicator for the situation? Or is it that I'm not encompassing the location, the social norms, the needs? You know, if we have someone who has a lot going on, or their experience. I know I've worked with a client that nobody else wanted to work with. I tended to get always the ones that people were impatient with. And I'd come to find out, you know, they've just been passed around so much. So they're frustrated, and they had every right to be frustrated. Did they have a right to be like aggressive with me? No, but it was a conditioned behavior. By being aggressive in their conversation, that's how they started getting their way, because people just didn't want to deal with them. And so I used my skills right as a CHW to de-escalate that, break it down, and to better understand, and to help inform the system. You know, sometimes our resource access is not well defined and not very accessible, and we need to help. I've had the same thing in my work life with a colleague who was also a superior on the project that I was on, who used to scream at everybody. He would just, whenever he wasn't getting his way, he would raise his voice. He would, you know, call people names. He would be very outward. And these are high meetings at the state of Michigan where you're looking around the room thinking, how are people tolerating this? Again, I think in his case, it was more like learned behavior. But this is where we can be aware of our communication style, aware of how we engage with others who are acting in a specific manner, and how do we pair that, right? Would I want to come at this individual with aggression too? No, more than likely that's going to put fuel on the fire, escalate the conversation. But I also don't want to come at it so passive that I get walked on. So you have to use more of an assertive and fact-based type of conversation style to really come to some common ground and try to move it forward. What are some in your guys's, so I'll go back to the slide then. Why do we communicate the way we do? So think through that. Why are you communicating the way that you do? And has there been a scenario, you know, think of a certain scenario, whether it be with a supervisor, with your care teams, in your personal life. Share with us something that has maybe been a barrier or something that's been really a success.
I think that this is Rita. I think that the way that we communicate, sometimes it has to do the way that you were brought up. And probably the person raising you, the people around you did not correct you, or if you interrupted, it was okay. There were no boundaries.
Yeah.
Something like that, I think.
I like that. Yeah, especially as you get to know people, it could be learned behavior. You know, and that's where, and I deal with this too, right? I'm in leadership. I have teams. I often, the first thing I ask them is, what we have to discover is this intentional, or are they not self-aware? Sometimes we can do things, and I think we have to take a step back and pull ourselves out of it. Is the individual in an aggressive point, right, or a dominant type of conversation? These usually tend to be the examples of someone's being passive aggressive or aggressive. Are they doing it intentionally? Is there ill intent, or do they lack the self-awareness? And if it's the latter, right, they lack the self-awareness, when you bring it to their attention, can you move through it or not?
I also think like if you're dealing with people that have trauma, that sometimes they just want someone to listen, like to take the time to hear them out. Because a lot of times, I came across people where like, you start talking to them and then all of a sudden now they're talking about something extremely like personal and like traumatic. And, I don't try to cut them off or anything like that. I try to sit there and listen to them and still engage in conversation with them. But I think sometimes some people weren't able to like communicate with anybody regarding those feelings, and sometimes they can come up like out of nowhere. And I think being able to deal with people that might have different types of trauma, and a lot of times they want someone to be able to listen to them, so they can kind of like realize what they're saying and process things that have happened.
And some of it, I think is training. We say, why do we communicate the way we do? Oftentimes us, right, as community health workers, we have expanded training in motivational interviewing, communication styles, emotional intelligence, things that make us maybe comfortable when others are not comfortable. I find that with myself a lot, having to recognize my audience just might not have had that level of experience. And even like when you talk about trauma, they might not be aware of the trauma and how it's coming out in their conversation. Those are all great. Thank you for sharing. So now it's time in our agenda, as we always move through these discussions so quickly, to talk about other group sharing. Are there other things going on in your CHW world that you guys would like to share with your peers? And then I will close us out, unless Rebecca wants to close us out as we talk about some things that are up and coming with RCHWN and our August presentation notes. So open the floor for any group sharing.
So in my program, the focus has sort of shifted recently at the direction of our director, away from trying to establish like rapport with providers within our organization, hoping to garner referrals, and towards like outreach in the community with community partners who potentially periodically may refer people to our program, which I don't know, I feel like there's so much more work to do internally, and that if our program is specifically based on our grant, supposed to be targeting emergency department super utilizers, and it just, I'm a little confused as far as why the director is kind of redirecting us to do outreach externally when we're not getting referrals from our own, from providers in our 2 emergency departments. I'll typically get maybe 1, often 0 referrals in a whole week at our smaller hospital in the county. So spending time going to senior centers and congregate living, places just doesn't make that much sense to me when we haven't done up to this point a real good job, in my opinion, of getting our program and services integrated into, what's happening here in the emergency department where the super utilizers can be found. So that's been a bit of a struggle for me of late.
Thank you for sharing that. And feel free to, group members, if you have any solutions or things that you have, if you've experienced the same things, what could be done. Every program is a little bit different. And I think I know I've shared this a lot with our community health workers. Oftentimes what we find is that CHW programs are started in kind of very isolated ways and very siloed ways within organizations. How do we operationalize it and evolve and change? But at the same time, our in-reach is just as important as our outreach. And how do we maintain both?
I have experience with the similar programs that you're describing. And I have worked with higher realizers and also emergency department referrals and clinics as well as outreach in the community. We did something very similar just because we needed to prove that we are having successful connecting folks with resources. And that was helpful for us also because a lot of times clinical partners don't understand CHW work very well. So the best way to illustrate what CHW support can do for their patients is to bring success stories. So that was helpful for us, having those stories that we go out in the community and having success stories, even reconnecting folks with the medical system, connecting with resources that allow them to focus on their health outcomes was helpful for us. It's always challenging with emergency departments because that's not a priority for them. Doing the screening and referral is not a priority. People is there for a few minutes. They had to move in out. And a lot of times, those higher realizers are going there for reasons that can be within a preventive care appointment with the primary care provider. So at the time that they leave the place, they don't want to talk to anyone. So people miss the screening piece or the connection piece, the referral piece. Even we have a part of a problem where this information got sent to us and we were called them for a follow-up and also to help and set up an appointment with the primary care provider and going from there. And people were not super receptive. They really don't want to spend time anymore. A lot of folks go there because they feel sick at the moment and now they have to worry about the next thing, how they're going to pay their bill, how they're going to make out those hours that they didn't work for. They really don't want to follow up and give you time because they don't feel it's a priority for them. So just don't feel alone. You're not alone in your struggle. What has been successful for us is to catch those folks in the system. So they're going to need resources and they're most likely connected already with resources and anywhere with CBOs or agencies. And what has been helpful for us is create those relationships in the front line where we can kind of huddle and having reconnecting with us. And we do the same thing as well with those clients that work with us. We reconnect them with agencies and CBOs. And that has been helpful. We went from having emergency department utilization and follow-up, and sometimes trying to implement having the screening in the emergency department, but we were not super successful. We tried for 3 years and we were not super successful. But then when we expanded to have a bigger coalition with all the agencies and CBOs who provide for these folks, and we start reconnecting and finding better ways to not duplicating services and also communicating as much as HIPAA allows us about services and also identifying gaps and assessing needs, that has been helpful for us. I don't know if if there's any consolation, this is not a unique problem. And, a wider collaboration and outreach helps because it helps you build those relationships that in the end is going to help you serve your clients.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, for sharing and for joining us. I know I see a few faces and a few in the chat too. Sylvia also joined us and had shared earlier, that in our regards to the conversation about strategies, that you have to approach people with respect and that they all matter because we don't know what everybody's going through. And also shared that the CHWs where she works, they communicate very well with one another and help lean on one another for sharing resources. Yeah. Oh, and huddles. Yeah. Having care team huddles. So if you're part of a community-based care team or even a clinical team, huddles are so very important. Having communication feedback loops established at every different level. So whether it's your documentation and connection in your EMR, is it your, early morning chart prepping that you guys are meeting together, or does it happen between visits with patients? In our community-based care teams, we're often working alongside other community health workers or frontline workforce to make sure that we're making those connections happen. I know for our 2-on-1, our virtual team, at RCHWN, they're doing a lot of that in their Ring Central and other team-based kind of chat channels to stay connected. Thank you for all those. I'm going to provide a few updates and then we'll continue with the group sharing. Quick reminder for those of you that watch the recording that you, for homework, please share with us, again, at least one of those struggles or barriers that you're experiencing to effective communication. And for our updates and reminders, great update with our store. We had a wonderful order from North Carolina. Quite a load of t-shirts. I don't know if it was 80 t-shirts, and Rebecca can correct me, but we had a group there that bought them for their health system and for their celebration for community health workers. As a reminder, anything bought from the store, all proceeds go into that scholarship fund that helps to support things like the annual retreat and other needs for community health workers. So it's really rewarding when community health workers themselves were buying and supporting and kind of feeding into that and also enjoying those shirts. And I know many of you guys as well have bought things, so thank you for that. And any new items that you find and or want, we're happy to do. We do a lot of very small orders, and so we're able to be adaptive and get those to you. The annual retreat and conference is in South Carolina. It's going to be July 13th in person and a virtual option. So if you have not registered, please register. As a member, that is included, and we want you guys to be there and present in any way that you can. News will be going out today. We added a pre-session as well. So conference will actually begin on the 14th, and we'll be doing that epilepsy training. So neurological epilepsy response for community health workers. It's a very great certificate and training program out of Dartmouth. And so excited to be able to offer that to the group at no charge. And then again, as your memberships renew annually, on the month of renewal, you'll get reminders from Rebecca, but if you have any questions on those, let us know.
You said July 13th. You meant the 15th, right?
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, July 15th. It's Friday, July 15th.
How many people from Michigan are going?
We have 7.
Oh, okay.
And then we have several that are attending virtually.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Will you send out an email with the mass or like with the link so that we can attend virtually?
Yep. I can resend out the registration. So the registration's live on the website, and you do have to register and then just let Rebecca know if you're going to be in person. Although our hotel block is no longer active, they're doing their best they can to give us some discounts and make sure that our individuals are able to come. And then as soon as we end this conference, right, we're going to start planning and celebrating for the next one. So I was really thankful this year to the members who stepped up and contributed to being part of the conference planning committee. It was our first year having a conference planning committee, and I'm very excited and looking forward to starting the planning process with that committee in August. So we've got about 5 minutes left in our time together. Please feel free to continue to do some group sharing. This is the time in the presentation where I will close us out. Thank everybody for being here, and then we'll stay on again for our sharing that we do.